It's a nasty way of doing things, but I want to, before it gets too late, I did want to share with you guys the main reason why we're here and why we call this Star Wars. So, of course, none of this now sounds far-fetched to you guys. I'm pretty sure it hasn't for quite some time, as far as, you know, reptilians and the Anunnaki, right? So now that we have a good understanding of who they are both collectively, I wanted to share with you guys, like I said, the meat and potatoes here, which is, the moon has a dark secret. And this gentleman has a channel called the Y-Files. I implore you guys to definitely go check out the Y-Files when you get a chance, because he has a lot, and I mean a lot, that I'm probably going to be binge watching myself. And do not mind the goldfish. The goldfish actually cracks some pretty good nerd jokes, but do not mind his goldfish. His goldfish, of course, to some of you, to the older audience, it might throw you off a little bit, but don't mind the goldfish.
This episode of the Y-Files is brought to you by the military online game.
I'm going to just skip ahead here to the beginning of it and past the ads.
Milk. The oldest recorded history comes from ancient Sumerian texts, and that's where we're first introduced to the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are believed to be 7 deities, also referred to as the 7 gods who decree. Their purpose was to determine the fate of mankind, and their stories mirror some that we find in Greek mythology. And like the Greek gods, the Anunnaki dwell in the heavens, but also interact with people and influence events here on Earth. Gods from polytheistic religions like the Anunnaki, the Greek gods, and the Roman gods served many purposes. They were used to explain natural phenomena like Zeus creating thunderstorms. Thor also served this role in Norse mythology. The gods provided comfort about the uncertainties of life and questions about mortality, the afterlife, and human suffering. Gods and their myths established social norms and values. Myths often included lessons about the virtues of honesty, courage, and wisdom, or the danger of hubris and deceit. Worshipping gods who represent these qualities creates a framework for social and moral order. Gods are part of the creation myth of many cultures, used to explain the origin of mankind. This was also true for the ancient Sumerians. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, written thousands of years ago, the Anunnaki are directly involved in the creation of humans. However, the stories about the Anunnaki might not be myths. The stories might be history. Zechariah Sitchin, in his book The 12th Planet, claims the Anunnaki are actually aliens who visited Earth thousands of years ago from their home planet Nibiru. When they arrived, the deity called Enki added alien DNA to ancient man, and the result was us. The intention was to create a slave species to mine gold for the Anunnaki. The gold was refined and used in terraforming their home planet, which was suffering from a poisoned atmosphere. Now, this may sound like a far-fetched story to some,
well, not to me,
but this creation story shows up in other cultures as well. There's an ancient Zulu legend about 2 brothers named Wawani and Mpanku, who were from an alien race with scaly skin. Thousands of years ago, the brothers stole an egg from a fire dragon, emptied out the yolk until it was hollow, and then rolled it across the sky to Earth. That egg was the moon. Many ancient texts describe a time when the moon didn't exist, or at least it didn't exist here.
So isn't that something right there? You literally just heard how the moon was even created, okay? It started out as just a little tiny egg, and then, boom. I'll run it back for you guys in case you didn't get it, because that was pretty quick.
That egg was the moon. Thousands of years ago, the brothers stole an egg from a fire dragon, emptied out the yolk until it was hollow, and then rolled it across the sky to Earth. That egg was the moon.
Interesting theory to how the moon actually was created, huh?
Many ancient texts describe a time when the moon didn't exist, or at least it didn't exist here. Aristotle wrote about the Pelasgians, who lived in ancient Greece since the oldest days, at a time before the moon. Apollonius of Rhodes also talks about a time when the moon wasn't yet in the sky.
In ages past, before the silver orb adorned night's somber shroud, Gaia stood alone. The tides lay still, untouched by Luna's grasp, and darkness reigned where moonlight never cast its tranquil spell. Oh, how the gods conspired to shape that radiant disk.
Greek historian Plutarch wrote about the Arcadians. They were a very ancient people who lived in Greece. Plutarch described them as a pre-lunar people. Roman poet Ovid also wrote about the Arcadians.
In Arcadia's lush fields, where Pan's flute sang, a truth lies hidden, nearly forgot by man. The Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Zeus, and the folk is older than the moon.
Evidence of a sky with no moon has also been found on the other side of the world. In the ancient site of Tiwanaku in Bolivia, there are symbols that depict the moon coming into orbit. And this happened at a specific moment in time thousands of years ago, long before recorded history. According to the Zulu and other ancient cultures, the moon didn't form. The moon was built, and not built here. The Zulus say that the moon was built in another part of the galaxy by the alien race that Wawani and Mpanku came from. They built the moon as a monitoring station to keep an eye on us, the human race. But what kind of aliens are depicted in these old legends? They're not the small gray aliens. The aliens that built the moon are reptilian.
Lizard people?
Yep, lizard people.
Lizard.
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 Better.
So, as you heard, this is where the whole Anunnaki versus reptilians start to come into play. Because the reptilians are the ones who have said to are the inhabitants of the moon and the creators necessarily on the moon. And this whole thing about the watchers and keepers over us originally were the reptilians. Anunnaki, of course, but the reptilians were on the moon.
Let's go!
David Icke has written over 20 books about various conspiracy theories. He's covered everything from the Illuminati to UFOs to the multiverse.
He's my hero.
But he's probably best known for his theory about a humanoid reptilian race.
Well, it's not a theory if it's true.
Do you mind?
Sorry. Lizard people get me really excited.
Oh, I know.
Did you know you can buy a Lizard People coffee mug from the iFile store?
No merch plugs, please. Icke claims that humans share the Earth with a race of shape-shifting reptilian humanoids called the Archons. Wawani and Mpanku, the brothers from the Zulu legend who brought the moon to Earth, were Archons. The Sumerians called these Archon brothers Enki and Enlil, who were also rulers of the Anunnaki. This race of reptilians primarily lives underground, but a few of them live among us as well. The surface-dwelling beings are here to make sure humanity stays compliant with and unaware of their plan. They're involved in the highest levels of government, business, and technology. They're monarchs, politicians, and bankers. They own and operate major media companies.
Mark, are the allegations true that you are secretly a lizard? I'm gonna have to go with no on that. I am not a lizard.
Considering Mark's makeup, considering the times that he's had slits in his eyes as well, considering the actual live, I didn't even think to pull it up actually, to where he was even in court and his eyes did the slit. You can look at Mark Zuckerberg and tell he has some type of amphibian thing going on with his entire makeup. You can literally say that about Mark Zuckerberg. That's not even a joke. You can literally look at Mark Zuckerberg and say amphibian, which would derivative be from reptiles, of course. But anyway, think about the fact that Mark Zuckerberg is one of the first people to also buy the bomb bunker, right? If you thought about him getting the bunker over in Hawaii, and he's already underground, he's already in subterranean dwelling. And of course, in a nice climate like Hawaii, very chameleon-like, wouldn't it be?
They influence every aspect of human life. They are the Illuminati. When we describe the reptilians as shapeshifters, you might think of a creature that physically changes its shape, like Odo from Star Trek, Mystique from Marvel Comics, or Tonks from Harry Potter. Reptilians don't do this. They actually always look like themselves. What they do is manipulate the human brain to perceive them differently. The source of the reptilians' power is their ability to alter our perception of reality. And they don't do this with telepathy, they do this with technology. According to David Icke, the moon is not only a spacecraft, but also a holographic projection device. The broadcasts from the moon warp our reality, or at least our perception of reality.
Which would make a lot more sense to why it's plain white. And if you think about how, what's the best wall to play a movie projection on? It's usually a white wall, right? That's not by coincidence. That's by design that it's like that. When we're talking about holographic projections, how many times have people said to you, yo, that moon look like it's glitching out? Or give you another example. The face by the moon we saw. You can't tell me that ain't a hologram.
There's what's known as a frequency embargo around the Earth.
Wait. Who enforces this embargo?
Well, there's a bunch of alien races who are part of a galactic federation, and they keep an eye on the reptilians, but it's a whole thing.
Go on, I got time.
No, it needs its own video.
She got me all...
So you heard that though, right? There's pretty much a few different people, or a few different species, I should say, that are in guard of the reptilians. So it sounds like it's almost like something straight out of a movie here, where these reptilians are pretty much obsessed with world domination and power, and they've figured out how to obtain that on Earth through manipulating and enslaving us through currency. If you really want to think about it, reptilians have enslaved us through currency because of our original makeup of our origin system of working. Remember, back in the days, we were still workers for the Anunnaki. So they basically took the same DNA makeup system and implemented it inside of Earth with money and currency, something that we were going to need and want to survive and live and have all these luxurious things and so on and so forth. So it makes a lot more sense when I'm hearing that there are more species that were supposedly in guard of the reptilians. There were species that were literally watching out for them, saying, okay, these guys might go from planet to planet on some domination shit. So we need to... These reptilians pretty much have a Napoleon complex to them, needless to say.
Excited! This is a bunch of bullshit.
There is much more to reality than we can perceive with our senses, and the human brain is quite capable of experiencing the true universe. In fact, it was specifically designed to do so. But the frequencies that would allow us to see the real world are being blocked. Instead, we're locked into this simple three-dimensional existence, but there is much more being withheld from us. If you believe in simulation theory, then these beings are the creators of the simulation. If you're religious, then these beings are demons or jinn. Either way, they're not our friends. But why? Why would an advanced race want to keep humans oblivious to the real world? Well, when humans were first created, the alien creators learned something. All other animals on Earth are driven by instinct. The instinct to eat, to survive, to reproduce, and that's about it. But when the first humans were given sentience, a byproduct of that sentience was emotion. Sure, humans are still driven by instinct. We're driven to survive and reproduce like every other animal.
Ugh, and I got the guppy support payments to prove it. Oof,
But because humans are now aware of themselves and their existence, they experience the world differently. They experience...
In other words, if you remember back the Matrix, right? Remember the Matrix, I believe it was Revelations. Ironically, it was called Revelations. The third one, right? Where Neo is talking to the architect. Now, a lot of people, of course, probably fell asleep. Like, okay, maybe I fell asleep probably maybe the first 2 times I watched it, right? But in that actual conversation, if you really pay attention, the architect simply asks Neo, yo, what is the systematic problem to the Matrix? And Neo figured it out. The problem is choice. The systematic problem to the Matrix in our reality is actually choice. So what he's talking about with the fact that reptilians harp on our energy and our negative energy They harp on the fact that we are emotionally driven by choice. So the fact that we're emotionally driven by choice, by DNA makeup, that was easier for us to be enslaved and want the currency of money.
Experience fear of the future. Humans experience the pleasure of nostalgia for the past. No other animal has this gift or this curse. Animals kill for survival, but humans kill out of hate. Our alien creators learned that our emotions carry energy, and the creators learned that this energy can be consumed for nourishment. Unfortunately for us, negative emotions are the most nourishing of all. Some have described the alien desire for negative human emotion as a drug addiction. If humans were able to see and understand our true reality, we'd know that our energy, or soul, or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, can move to a higher plane of existence after we die.
Exactly. So I'm going to pause it right there real quick, right? While he says that. He's right. If we were to actually use, that's why they say we only use 5% of our brain. We're only allowed to use 5% of the brain. If we were allowed to use the entire 100% of the brain, we would be able to do different things with it as far as going into different space continuums, different portals and things like that. We would be able to see outside of their makeup as far as the reptilians and shapeshifting goes, which brings me to what Kushnis is asking about, explain the glitching, because there's more to it. So we did go over the glitching as far as the facial makeup with the glitching, right? And he also harped on it as well a little bit, to where he explained how the glitching actually works. Manipulation of the mind, like we just said, the manipulation and perception that the reptilians cause is how they're able to do what they do with the shapeshifting, thus why the glitching actually even happens. So there's another clip of Justin Bieber to where he says, hey, all this screaming going on in the middle of the break when the song stops, it needs to stop. It needs to stop. He wanted the screaming to stop because it's no different than when you're screeching down a chalkboard with someone that is possessed. The vessel cannot take that screeching, and it affects the nerve system to where the possessor is actually being affected. So when Justin was basically freaking out on stage over the loud screeching of the screaming, it was because his possessor of the vessel was starting to get irritated and started to show its true form, and he couldn't control it. Thus, the same thing happens with the glitching. What actually happens with the glitching, if you notice, it happens during times of what? Nervousness. It affects the nerve system with the glitching. So whenever perfect example, right? When we saw Justin get his name called, all of a sudden his eyes slit. When the gentleman started to talk about change and this, that, and the third. Notice when they started emphasizing on certain words like change and transformation, all of a sudden that humanoid starts to get nervous and their whole genetic makeup starts to actually glitch out and show. Same thing happened with George Bush Sr. George Bush Sr. didn't necessarily want to be there that day. You can see it in his face. And his nervous system started to react. That's where you saw the slit in the eye. Every time you see something happening to where one of these reptilians or humanoids are getting nervous by something, that's when you'll start to see the glitch out happen. Because the possessor, their nerves, that's something that they cannot control. The average humanoid cannot control the nerve system part. So whenever the nerve system part starts to act up, they start to act up.
But instead, the alien creators, addicted to our emotions, keep us here. We're born, we live to feed the creators, then we die. Then we come back and do it all over again. It's forced reincarnation. This process is handled by a piece of equipment that's been called a soul recycler, or a soul cube, which is a large box-shaped device that's installed on the moon. The cube watches us and then transmits our energy back to Earth after we die.
Now, I want to pause it right here because he's saying this very fast. But yes, there is supposedly a soul cube on the moon. I want to show you right here to where they actually show that. Yes, the government protecting people in prison from the alien. That's funny. That's funny right there. not necessarily, but that is hilarious right there. So look at this right here, right? Actually saved the where is it? Where is it? Oh yeah. So they actually have pictures here of this actual soul catcher and this cube that was on the moon. Now, ironically, aside from this, right? This moon cube, as you will, it looks like something out of that movie that Ice Cube was in with Mars, doesn't it? Well, speaking of Ice Cube, right? Get a load of this. Ice Cube was under fire recently. This is June 11th, 2020. Was under fire for tweeting anti-Semitic images of conspiracy theories. Now, of course, they masked it with the anti-Semitic images of conspiracy theories. It doesn't even make sense what you're actually saying. This is what they actually were getting. They pretty much tried to do a hate campaign because he tried to break out the truth once again. Ice Cube is facing criticism for sharing a number of anti-Semitic images of conspiracies on Twitter. Now, you tell me where this is an actual conspiracy. The actor 50 tweeted at several images over the past week that featured imagery fans quickly slammed as offensive. This was not offensive, actually. One photo depicted a group of men while with exaggerated facial features, typical of anti-Semitic imagery, playing Monopoly on the backs of black people, and another suggested that the black cube of Saturn, which conspiracy theorists claim is a cult symbol, lies within the Star of David. Now, where would he get the black cube of Saturn randomly from, right? Unless, of course, we're talking about the same rapper that said "fuck America" back in the day with the America KKK at the end of it, right? We're talking about No Vaseline Ice Cube, okay? The same Ice Cube that was preaching back then, pretty much by himself, of fight the system. We're talking about that Ice Cube. So of course they're going to dismiss him saying the black cube of Saturn was inside the Star of David. Notice how they keep emphasizing the whole anti-Semitic. There's nothing anti-Semitic about talking about the black cube of Saturn being inside the Star of David. Okay. Now, besides that, okay, that wouldn't be the first time someone has mentioned the cube of Saturn or even the cube being on the moon handing our soul catchers. This is a clip here from Rumble.
b.l.a.c project. Have you ever heard of the Soul Cube? I remember reading an article about 6 or 7 years ago on a conspiracy forum, and this article talked about John Lear and how he was a part of a military program where they actually remote viewed somebody when they died, and they watched their soul go to this literally recycling station, essentially, this cube on the moon. Now, it could definitely be disinformation, absolutely. It could be a grand conspiracy, somebody's made-up story, and it could also possibly be legit.
And pretty much, it so far has been sounding very legit, honestly. Because if you think about it, if we're thinking about all the things that we've just, uncovered and went over, it would certainly mean and make sense that the whole war over our mind and body, you know how they say it's a war over our mind and body and our spirit? The war is over our souls. So this Star Wars that's happening is literally over our souls. So think about how they say, oh, your soul's going to go to heaven or your soul's going to go to hell. They start trying to scare you and use fear tactics over your soul, right? Think about that, right? This whole entire thing, if we're putting together all the facts, right? The black cube of Saturn, the soul catcher and recycler that is supposedly on the moon also being a a base originally from the reptilians, or should I say home to the reptilians, and then it being the Anunnaki being our original creators, and then the reptilians supposedly being in politics, being able to manipulate us even further and keep us under their control and power, similar to how they did on the moon. If you really think about that, it isn't far-fetched at all that it is reptilian versus Anunnaki, and this is all about a fight over our souls.
Over and over again, and has been doing so for thousands of years. Now, I know the theory sounds like science fiction, but many skeptics were turned into believers on December 6, 2021. That's when, completely by accident, a lunar probe took a picture of the Soul Cube.
It's my conclusion over many years that reincarnation is a trap. It's not that it doesn't exist, although I don't think it's quite the same as it's explained. It's a bit more subtle, maybe, but I do think it's a trap.
The recycling of souls, reincarnation, is the machinery of this universe.
John Lear, son of Learjet inventor Bill Lear, flew his first flight at age 14. He became a stunt pilot, a contract pilot for the CIA, and set multiple aviation records. But John Lear's most known for his theories about the alien presence on Earth. He's also exposed a lot of information about the cube-shaped soul catcher on the moon.
The soul catcher is I think is the 6 mile high tower in the middle of Sinus Medai, right in the middle of the center of the moon as you look at the moon. And the famous photo that Richard found, Lunar Orbiter 384M, shows that huge tower, and he also has 2 other photographs that show that tower. I think that tower is what I call the soul catcher. When you die, your soul goes to the soul catcher.
But the moon isn't the only place these soul catchers exist.
There are several soul transmission stations, both on Earth and on the moon, and depending on where you're going in your next lifetime is which transmission station takes over.
When you couple John Lear's belief in the soul catcher with David Icke's theory that we're stuck in an endless loop of reincarnation, an unsettling reality emerges that our only purpose is to serve as food for our alien jailers. And what's even more upsetting is that negative emotions are really what they crave. Supporters of the reptilian humanoid theory say that when there's a global event that affects millions of people, like a war or major conflict, it's our jailers at work.
It might explain.
Now it starts to make even more sense. It's all right, Zane. It's all right, Zane. Now this time we did cover quite a lot. We did cover quite a lot in these last 2 hours. But yeah, it would make even more sense to why they harp on, or should I say, it would make even more sense to why we're attracted to negative energy. If you think about the things that we have on TV that entertain us, majority of the time it's negative. You think about the things that entertain us as far as what's funny and what's on our timelines and social media, majority of the time it's negative bullshit. I actually commented on a post into which this young lady, I think I talked about it before, this young lady was in a mukbang, you know, with the mukbang where they're eating the food or whatever, and she was pretty much obese while she was doing this mukbang, but it was one of those mukbangs to where she was not going to stop. It was almost like a marathon thing, and she pretty much died. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, I even commented on the post, I said, we have gotten to a place now to where we find someone dying of obesity in front of our eyes on a live stream as entertainment. We don't deserve to be a human race anymore. We truly don't. Because if that is what entertains us, we need a huge reset at this point. We need a huge reset. If entertainment is negative, or should I say, if entertainment is people dying. Now, different from a movie to where we know it's fake and no one's actually dying, that's different. I take liking in the creativity of gore when it's done right, because I look at it as a art form. in horror movies, okay? That's a little bit different than someone actually dying and their soul leaving, possibly even going into this soul catcher and recycler, okay? So that is another reason why I do the whistleblowing. It's the main reason right there. Because I want people to know the actual truth of what goes on, okay? But again, makes plenty of sense on why we feed off of, or should I say, why we're entertained by negative energy and everything that is negative, so to speak. You how many times today have you laughed at someone falling? Or have you laughed at someone being smacked? You know what I mean? How many times have you laughed at someone fighting? How many times have you cheered a fighting video on? Today. Not even in the past. I'm talking about just today. How many times have you laughed at someone else's misfortune today? Literally, we are programmed and made to be entertained and want, not even entertained, want negative energy. We may want to attract positive energy, but as the saying goes, once a hood rat, always a hood rat. That hood rat always going to go back to that negative energy because that's all they know. As my Lyft driver said earlier, we just have to be taught better. We weren't taught better. We were literally programmed to want nothing but negative energy.
Why Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens sapien is so violent. Why are we always in states of war? Why are we competing and always challenged by murder and violence?
I really don't like the idea that we're not in control of our lives. And I really hate the idea that we're not in control of our death. So my mind just rejects the idea altogether. But then I found this.
What the is that?
That is the Soul Cube on the moon.
Leaping lizards! See what I did there?
This photo was taken December 6, 2021 by the Chinese-made lunar rover Yutu-2 while exploring the far side of the moon. A cube-shaped object is clearly seen 80 meters from the Von Karman crater. And for some reason, the China National Space Administration labeled this object Mystery Hut. And this only lends credence to the idea that the moon is a sort of observatory with a soul-harvesting machine. There's even more evidence that Earth is actually what some call a prison planet. In his book, Humans Are Not From Earth, Dr. Ellis Silver contends that humans are actually from another planet. They were brought here thousands of years ago and mated with Neanderthals. The hybrid species is us.
My thesis proposes that mankind did not evolve from native Earth organisms, but evolved elsewhere and was transported to Earth between 60,000 and 200,000 years ago. Mankind is supposedly the most highly developed species on the planet, yet is surprisingly unsuited and ill-equipped for Earth's environment.
The idea that extraterrestrials played a role in human history is also known as intervention theory. Dr. Silver argues that if humans actually evolved on Earth, we'd be much more comfortable with the environment. For example, humans are really the only animals that are susceptible to sunburn. Fish, reptiles, birds all have natural ultraviolet protection in their scales and feathers. Whales and dolphins have special skin cells that repair DNA damaged by UV radiation. Any mammal with fur is protected from ultraviolet rays, including apes. If we evolved from apes, why did we lose our hair? Evolution is supposed to make us stronger, not weaker.
Not true for your Uncle Vito.
Well, see, that's the thing. So, very true. It's not supposed to necessarily make us weaker. However, that would also, and they didn't necessarily harp on it there, but that would also, and I wish I had more time to get into it, reason why we would be, some of us would be made from the sun and the whole melanin theory. That's what that sounds like to me.
It's true. He's pretty hairy.
Pretty hairy? Ugh, I bet that guy can open a banana with his feet.
Dr. Silver points out that human babies are basically helpless at birth. They require constant attention for years or they'll die. Yes, some species of animals require parental care for a time after birth, but there are plenty of species that require none. Insects, fish, and most reptiles are born completely self-sufficient. Some land mammals are born standing up. Some birds are born with their eyes open and able to find food on their own. No other animal on the planet is as helpless as we are at birth. Silver claims the reason so many people have bad backs is that we evolved on a planet with less gravity.
Wow. So for all y'all that thought it was just your construction job or you ain't been working out, it's because of the gravity, y'all. No, seriously though, that would make a lot more sense to why even people that are fit, even people that are actually fit and healthy and in shape, their back is the first thing usually that goes. And as she said, or should I say, as he said, it's mainly because of that. The whole we're not necessarily used to even having gravity around us, which proves the theory again, what we talked about earlier about using 100% of your brain. When we talk about gravity and using more percentage of the brain, look what happened in the movie Matrix with Neo. When he started using more of a percentage of his brain than he was allowed to, he was actually to use a part that no one had ever seen, and he was able to dodge bullets and everything like that. So, again.
That's why as we age, our knees and hips give out.
Because of the fact that, you know, we're not used to that actual gravity on Earth, and we came from a different planet. A lot of trained habits are probably still from that planet. As far as our DNA makeup, we probably still have a lot of habits from that planet that we just don't know yet.
We're not designed to be so heavy. We're also prone to chronic illness more than other mammals. So why were we brought here in the first place? Well, Silver has a few ideas. One is that humans were brought to Earth as a natural predator to wipe out other species. Now, if that's true, it worked. At one time, there were several different hominid species living on Earth at the same time. As recently as just 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and at least one other species coexisted with each other for several 100,000 years. Then modern man arrived, and suddenly all other species were gone. But Dr. Silver has another theory that tracks with a lot of what we've discussed today, that humans were removed from our natural environment because we were violent, we were destructive, and we overconsumed natural resources.
Well, that hasn't changed.
The theory said that the aliens erased our memories so we'd have no recollection of the civilizations and technologies we left behind. Then they dropped us off on Earth and left us to our own devices. They watched us for a while to see how we developed, and eventually they left. All the UFO activity we're seeing now could be our creators coming to check on their creation. Maybe they're checking to see if we've evolved past our violent tendencies. Maybe we're finally ready to be released from our prison and reintegrate into galactic society. If that's really why they're here, then unfortunately for us, our parole, it's going to be denied.
Right. Which is why I said before, Cube Vision. Hey, good catch there, Beer Gang. Great catch there, Beer Gang. So if we're talking about the black cube of Saturn, hold on. Let me see if I could. That makes a lot of sense there. Look at Ice Cube's logo. It's a direct derivative of the black cube of Saturn. Cube ain't never been dumb, y'all. Ice Cube ain't never been dumb. Good catch there, Beer Gang. Good catch there, sir.
The existence of the human soul has been pondered, well, forever. Greek philosophers like Plato and Socrates proposed an immortal soul that lives on after the body's death. Many religions say the soul originates from God and exists eternally. But does scientific evidence support the existence of a soul that can be quantified? In the early 20th century, physician Duncan McDougall tried to determine if the soul had measurable mass. He thought that if a soul existed, it would have weight. So upon death, the soul would escape and the weight loss could be detected. McDougall had 6 dying patients placed on sensitive scales, finding that they lost an average of 21 grams at the moment of death. He concluded this represented the soul's mass, but this small sample size and errors in methodology cast doubt on the experiment. Modern neuroscience says our consciousness and sense of self exist in our physical brain, not a separate soul. Brain imaging shows that our personality, our memories, and capabilities are tied to physical patterns and activity within our neurons. Damage to certain areas of the brain through injury or disease can impact sensory perception, mobility, emotions, and even one's identity. However, there is an argument that, sure, the brain is responsible for cognition and awareness, but a soul could simply be energy that creates our consciousness. And if so, that consciousness could continue after death. According to new theories using quantum physics, the soul may exist in another dimension beyond our normal space-time. Some tie this to quantum non-locality and entanglement. This is where information is passed between particles not just faster than the speed of light, but instantly, no matter how far apart they are. This theory says the soul interacts with the human body through quantum states, exchanging information instantly across any distance. Studies of near-death experiences provide intriguing reports of the soul leaving the body and passing through a tunnel and encountering angelic beings or dead relatives. Yet neuroscience says many elements of NDEs are generated by physical brain activity under stress. Out-of-body and near-death episodes have been induced in controlled settings by stimulating specific parts of the brain. Conclusive scientific evidence of the human soul has yet to be discovered. But maybe the soul isn't meant to be detected with a scale or a microscope or a computer.
That's because it's handled by quantum physics, but that's a whole other story.
And just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Religions around the world say the soul is eternal. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the soul originates from God and can achieve eternal life through faith and virtuous living. Hinduism and Sikhism believe the soul is immortal and reincarnated based on karma. Buddhism is a little different, though. The Wheel of Life provides a symbolic map of samsara in Buddhism. Buddhists must attain enlightenment before moving beyond this cycle, and that can take many, many tries. And that's starting to sound a lot like the Soul Recycler. And here's something interesting. In the image of the Wheel of Life, which is found on the walls of monasteries and schools all over the world, Buddha's pointing at the moon.
Isn't that interesting? So the statue Buddha, if you think about it, the statue Buddha is always like this, right? He's always like this. That whole time, how many people actually knew that he was pointing up there at the moon and actually trying to tell you something?
The moon is the most familiar object in the night sky. It's inspired stories and myths and even religions. The moon has fueled scientific intrigue throughout human history. But here's the thing. The moon is weird. By all accounts, it shouldn't even be there. The moon's orbit is extremely close to the Earth. In fact, it's the largest moon in relation to its host planet in our entire solar system, or any solar system. We've never found anything like this in the galaxy. And this proximity has made total solar eclipses possible. This is because of the precise diameters and distances between the sun, moon, and Earth. This is an unbelievable coincidence. Some might say, impossible.
There is no astronomical reason why the moon and the sun should fit so well. It is the sheerest of coincidences, and only the Earth among all the planets is blessed in this fashion.
It's not only too close, it's too big.
That's what she said. What?
Using other planets as a reference, the size of the moon should be about 40 miles in diameter. That's it. It's over 2,000 miles wide. This is also not seen anywhere else. The closest comparison is Pluto and its moon Charon, which is about 2/3 the size of Pluto. But this probably doesn't count because Pluto and Charon are a double dwarf planet.
That's what she said. What?
The Earth and Moon are also really a double planet. But there's something else strange about that. The barycenter, or center of gravity between the Earth and Moon, is inside the Earth. That means there should be a wobble in the Moon's orbit. The Moon does wobble a little bit, but its orbit is one of the most perfectly circular that's ever been seen. The Moon is also precisely locked in orbit so the same side always faces Earth. This is also highly unusual among moons and planets. Some scientists argue that the Moon doesn't wobble because it's not very dense. But that's also a problem. If the Moon and Earth were formed at the same time, which is the leading theory, then why is the Earth so much more dense?
Because the moon is hollow.
Right.
Which again which again, being that the moon is hollow, that again goes back to what they were talking about with the moon being able to be a holographic projection machine almost, or should I say the flat wall that you can play the hollow projection off of. So if you're thinking about using satellites and whatnot for Project Bluebeam, Bluebeam is probably going to be from the moon.
The lunar orbiter experiments vastly improved our knowledge of the moon's gravitational field, indicating the frightening possibility that the moon might be hollow.
In November 1969, Apollo 12 launched as NASA's second manned mission to the moon. One of the key objectives was investigating the moon's interior. Apollo 12 astronauts placed seismometers on the lunar surface, similar to those used to detect earthquakes on Earth. The astronauts then intentionally crashed their ascent stage module into the moon to gather seismic data. Now, instead of typical seismic patterns, the data showed the moon vibrating for over an hour. The moon was famously described as ringing like a bell. The phenomenon led some to speculate that the moon might be hollow or contain significant hollow spaces. This theory is supported by the still classified Apollo 17 project called Chapel Bell. And this sounds like an experiment that has something to do with sound, but all these years later, it's still classified. Why? In 1970, two Soviet scientists proposed that not only is the moon hollow, the moon is an artificial spacecraft brought to Earth a long time ago. This spaceship moon theory explains many of the anomalies, like the low density, the sound reverberation, and why the moon is even here at all. Spaceship Moon also explains the strange crater issue.
Crater issue?
Oh yeah, moon craters are very odd. When an asteroid impacts a moon or planet, it leaves a crater. The bigger the asteroid, the deeper the crater, right?
Yeah, I feel you.
Well, on the moon, no matter how big the object that impacts it, craters don't penetrate deeper than a couple of miles. Now, this could be explained by a rigid, impenetrable outer shell encasing the moon.
Spaceship Moon!
If the astronomical data is reduced, it is found that the data require that the interior of the moon is less dense than the outer parts. Indeed, it would seem that the moon is more like a hollow than a homogeneous sphere.
Data also indicates the moon's core is less dense than the outer layers, the complete opposite of, well, every other celestial object ever discovered. This could be evidence that the moon has vast hollow inner cavities. Also, the soil and moon dust on the surface are actually older than the rock and soil within the moon. That only makes sense if the interior moon was mined, hollowed out, and then the material brought to the surface. Now, there are scientific explanations for all of this, but to be honest, they fall short.
Looking at all the anomalies and unanswered questions about the moon, the best explanation for the moon is an observational error. It doesn't exist.
It's easier to explain.
Isn't that something? So, something that they are even saying is, you know, supposedly used as a holographic projection is not actually even real at all, and it's supposed to be hollow. Meaning it's see-through. So think about that theory now. If that's true, that correlates with the whole thought of souls going to the moon, as well as the reptilians being able to watch us and be controllers of the moon. Because they're master manipulators and making you think of something that isn't even there is actually there.
The non-existence of the moon, then its existence.
We cannot help but come to the conclusion that the moon, by rights, ought not to be there. The fact that it is one of those strokes of luck almost too good to accept.
The moon is weird. It shouldn't be there, and it might be hollow. But is it a transmission device that affects our behavior? Well, there's more crime during a full moon. There are more car accidents. Sensitivity to pain is higher during a full moon. A full moon disrupts our sleep. Some people are prone to erratic behavior during a full moon. This is called the werewolf effect. This is also where the word lunatic comes from. Talk to a cop or a nurse. They'll tell you that they can tell when it's getting close to a full moon. Again, science tries to explain this erratic behavior. Like there's more crime during a full moon because it's easier to see.
No. It's also easier to get caught.
Right.
Way easier to get caught.
Science is thin. And notice that all these changes in behavior during a full moon are negative. More crime, more pain, more car crashes. If there are aliens feeding off our negative emotions and they use the moon to do it, well, suddenly everything makes sense. But there is good news. You can fight back. Reptilian humanoid aliens using technology to alter our reality in order to create negative emotions? Our souls being used for food, then recycled over and over again on the moon? This story is a lot. And how much of it is true? Well, a lot of it depends on your perspective and what you choose to believe. But let's take it one piece at a time. The Anunnaki are documented in Sumerian texts, but there's plenty of documentation of Zeus and Apollo and Athena and the rest of the Greek gods. Same with Roman gods, Norse gods, all gods really. But are any of those gods real? Well, you decide. But Zecharia Sitchin's interpretations of Sumerian texts have been largely discredited and disregarded. He's been criticized for inaccurate translations of the Sumerian tablets. Skeptics say he manipulated the translations in order to support his theory.
Yeah, but his story is true.
Maybe. But the story about gods coming from the sky, creating man or helping man, that story is almost universal. The Anunnaki are also connected to the Great Flood, which is a story found in every culture on Earth. Supporters of the Anunnaki theory claim that human genetics have traces of alien DNA. The truth is, human DNA is pretty boring.
But at the end of the day, none of it is actually fiction as far as how we were created. So we've now heard how many theories and how many actual evidences of fact that we were created from the Anunnaki? There hasn't been a single denial of that whatsoever, that we are created from the Anunnaki. So if we are being real here, the true holders of our soul are the Anunnaki.
Our DNA is close to everything on Earth. Chimps share almost 99% of their DNA with humans. Dogs and cows share around 80%. Birds and humans share 65% of their DNA. Humans even share over 50% of their DNA with bananas.
You're related to a banana?
Yup.
Maybe that's why you got a peel.
Dr. Ellis Silver's theory that humans didn't originate on Earth is really interesting. He lays out a lot of scientific evidence to support this theory. But even he admits the theory has some holes, and he's released updates to try and fill in some of these holes. Still, mainstream science rejects the idea that humans originated on a different planet. But there is a wrinkle. In 2020, researchers discovered that about 50,000 years ago, ancient humans procreated with a species that scientists didn't know existed. They call this ghost DNA, and the timing lines up perfectly with Dr. Silver's theory. His book is amazing, and I'd love to do a full episode on how humans might have been transported here, so if you'd like to see that, let me know. That will be a wild ride. Now, let's talk lizard people.
Lizard.
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 Better.
The most well-known proponent of the reptilian conspiracy is David Icke.
My hero.
David Icke is well-read, well-spoken, and highly entertaining. His theories are extremely creative. But like most conspiracy theories, you can't prove or disprove him.
Yeah.
But remember, in 1991, he claimed to be the son of God and the world was going to end, and he made this claim on television while wearing a turquoise tracksuit.
Good to see you. You do claim to be the son of God.
Oh, come on, heroes wear tracksuits.
The lizard people story seems to have started in 1934 with an LA Times article. A mining engineer claimed to have found tunnels underneath Los Angeles. A Hopi Indian told him the legend of the lizard people.
Tunnels underneath Los Angeles. Now, where have we heard that one from, right? What's good, Juju? Where have we heard about the tunnels underneath Los Angeles? Oh, I don't know. Didn't we hear about that with Diddy's mansion? To where they said there were tunnels underneath the mansion? Didn't we hear about that the same thing with the Playboy mansion? To where there were tunnels underneath L.A.?
Who are an advanced race that escaped through the tunnels 5,000 years ago.
Well, that's why so many movie stars are shape-shifting lizard people. Easy commute.
Maybe, but there are no tunnels and there is no Hopi legend of lizard people, so I don't believe that one. And honestly, when I started this topic, I didn't believe any of it. Well, except for the moon stuff. The moon is weird. But while researching, I found myself bouncing between feelings of depression and fear and anxiety and especially anger. The message boards, blogs, comment sections I came across are filled with people expressing outrage. They're furious that they have us all trapped in this never-ending loop of misery, that we're made to endure this torturous, unfair life time and time again. We're not given a choice to come back or not. Our only purpose is to be food for our prison guards. But if they truly believe that an advanced race is feeding off our negative emotions, well, they're giving our jailers exactly what they want. There were so many comments that were blame-seeking. I saw a lot of people with a self-centered victim mentality. It was frustrating to read, but I understand it. Life is hard. Life is unpredictable, and life is painful. When things in life go wrong, it's easy to shift responsibility to a theoretical they instead of looking in the mirror. David Icke, John Lear, and others who promote the reptilian conspiracy say that we don't have to exist in an endless cycle of pain and reincarnation. Negative emotions fuel the cycle. Positive emotions can break it. So you have a choice. You can choose to be the change. Choose kindness over anger. Choose acceptance over judgment. And choose gratitude over the endless desire for more.
And that would go with exactly why this is about the purpose of life. Remember what I said in the first community post? It's about the purpose of life? Because literally, in the end of the movie Dogma, literally, at the end of the movie Dogma, we have Alanis Morissette, and she touches the nose of the main character. The reason why she touches the nose of the main character is because the main character asks, hey, why am I here? What's the purpose of life? And she went and just said, boop, and touched her nose. Now, I thought about that and said, well, why did she touch her nose? And I thought about the shape of the nose and the bridge, right? If you think about the actual head of the triangle at the front, and that wraps around the nostril, what does it make? A heart. If it makes a heart, if each nose, if you think about it, unless you actually, like I said, again, reptilian, the makeup of the nose is actually a heart. So, being said that, and she touches her nose when she asks what's the purpose of life, I said, holy shit, the purpose of life is love? Now, that was almost a decade ago I thought about that. But more and more, I am finding more and more evidence that that actually is true. The purpose of life is actually love and positive energy. It's not actually for us to work, make money, and die. That's the manipulators part of it. For us to work, make money, and die. And then start it all over again. When we're actually supposed to just be here to love. We're just supposed to be here and be positive. And the whole idea of even giving us choice was the systematic problem, of course, but the choice was over money at all times. That's the unfortunate part about it, is that it's always been over money. And the parole officers, if you will, the reptilians, have made it so we are doomed with entertainment by negativity, which that is what they feed off of, our negativity. In the Anunnaki want us to be all positive and just love one another, because the purpose of life, again, is love. So, with that being said, we have concluded our episode on Star Wars here.